State Representative Matt Shaheen, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So school is coming back on. Classrooms are going to be filled with students really in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, how comfortable are you with the idea that the school districts did everything that they had to do as far as making sure those exterior doors worked,
Yeah.
and that they completed their partial safety audits?
I can tell you that I've had extensive discussions with the superintendents and trustees in the school districts, really throughout Collin County, but mostly in my districts. They're very well prepared. It is an absolute priority to keep our children safe. So a lot of the ISDs in Collin County have arrangements with local law enforcement where they have incredible response times. Literally, I'm talking about 2 or 3 minutes. If an incident happens, law enforcement is present. There's also relationships where a lot of times law enforcement, the city law enforcement will actually just be present throughout the day at the schools, paying visits, those types of things. So there's that presence as well. In addition to a lot of the schools in my district and really throughout Collin County also have RSO officers.
So, but did any of the school districts that you represent pinpoint to any problems as far as being able to, comply?
Not my districts. I mean, we are resource healthy in Collin County. I think we have to take a look at some of our rural areas and how we handle those. I think those are different scenarios. They don't. A lot of times you have school districts that are more rural based, so there you're dependent maybe on a sheriff's department where your response time isn't going to be 2 or 3 minutes, and I think you have to take a different approach there. But the school districts that I've talked to, from Prosper to Frisco to Plano, they have all the resources in place, and they've tested them. I've actually watched some of their tests, and they're ready. They're gonna keep those children safe. They're gonna give them a great education and prepare them for the workforce, college, whatever they want to do.
So let me ask you, because when we have interviewed survivors of the Santa Fe high school shooting, we interviewed a teacher who survived. We interviewed a student who survived. The teacher was concerned that, we didn't learn lessons from Santa Fe because they had issues with keys in classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
The gunman got through an unlocked door, and here we are in Uvalde with the very same issues.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what's your thought about that?
There is so much more of a focus in the state of Texas on this issue. It's horrific that we have to worry about it, but quite frankly, parents, teachers, principals are concerned, and they're going to do everything they can to keep their children safe, their students safe. My wife is an elementary school teacher. I'm personally vested in this and making sure that she's safe. And after watching some of the law enforcement, personally actually watching some of the law enforcement drills, meeting with superintendents and trustees on the plans that they have in place, they're actually doing their own internal audits to make sure that they're responding in an appropriate manner. I have a high level of confidence that our students here are going to be safe.
And as far as the law enforcement that you've spoken with
Mm-hmm.
and watched, what did they think of what the law enforcement response was to Uvalde?
When I talked to them, there's clearly some disappointment. A lot of the law enforcement officers I've talked to, retired chiefs of police, I've talked to current law enforcement, and clearly their training is to go in and engage immediately, not wait around, certainly don't wait around for 70 minutes. So there's some disappointments. I think part of the issue that we need to work through is, in the state of Texas, we have 2,700 law enforcement agencies. If you compare that to California, that's more than twice what California has, and they've got 20 million more individuals. And so here we have a situation like Uvalde where you had multiple law enforcement agencies, and how well do they work together? And are we asking too many law enforcement agencies to work together? And so a lot of the leaders here locally are learning from those lessons. We've, up in Prosper, we had a drill just about 2 weeks ago. And so they have really defined roles and responsibilities and where they meet up and how they approach the perpetrator and all those types of things. Those are all well defined, but to ask that all these multiple law enforcement agencies have all that defined throughout the state of Texas, we might be asking too much. I think one of the things that we need to take a look at is how many law enforcement agencies that we have, and is it a reasonable expectation that they all can work together on one incident?
Wanted to ask you, one of the takeaways from the interviews that my colleagues did with these survivors was they didn't think, this teacher in particular, didn't think that the state laws that were passed had enough teeth in them to make sure that the school districts were actually complying with them.
Yeah.
And when you look at, there was an audit that was done in October 2020 from the Texas School Safety Center. And it only found of the 1,000 plus school districts, only 67 had a sufficient multi-hazard emergency operations plan, 67.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what it's been like since. We're trying to find out if they did one and what were those results. And then the other issue is of the active shooter policies that they're supposed to come up with, only 200 had a viable plan. When you hear those numbers, what goes through your mind?
It's upsetting. There's over 1,000 school districts in the state of Texas, and obviously I think they're taking this a lot more seriously than they probably were in the past. But I think it's reasonable, the individual that you interviewed, as far as taking a look at state statute and does it have the appropriate teeth. I think we need to take a look at the different roles, including the TEA and other agencies, and their enforcement to ensure that there's audits, to make sure that they carry out those audits in an effective manner, to make sure it's very clear to them that they have the power to do those audits in any necessary fashion. I think we need to look at the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, and currently their powers are really focused more on misbehavior of a law enforcement officer, not so much their conduct. I think we need to take a look at that, but we need to balance the ability for our local response, or our local law enforcement, those individuals that are on the ground, and their ability to respond as well, their ability to take disciplinary action as well. So there's a balance that we need to take. We're a very broad, diverse state, and we don't want to control everything from Austin.
As it relates to, you were talking before about local control.
Yeah.
And my question is, given what we have seen as far as statistics, at least in that October 2020, given what the Texas School Safety Center told the Senate committee that questioning whether they even have the authority to do on-site compliance checks, is it time for the state to take a more assertive role when it comes to safety rather than just leaving it up to local control?
I think we need to look at that. Again, the best decisions, the best disciplinary actions are going to be at the local level, but clearly I think we need to take a look at expanding the role of TEA, Texas Education Agency. Do we expand the role of the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement to see if they need to play a broader role, just to make sure that schools are following their safety plans, that they in fact do have safety plans. We need to make sure our law enforcement is accredited appropriately. I think we need to take a look at how many law enforcement agencies. Again, I think there's some difficulty with so many different law enforcement agencies and their ability to work together in a crisis situation. So I'm confident we'll take a look at that next legislative session. We do have to recognize the Texas House did, I think, a fantastic job as far as researching and having hearings as far as what specifically happened in Uvalde. And as a result of that, a lot of the local entities that were involved in that response are doing their own internal investigations. And we really need to let that play out as well, see what actions that they do take. And I think we're going to have this debate next session for sure.
Last week, Governor Abbott was in Greenville, and so I asked him about what we were just talking about in teeth, and he said that yes, obviously, when you look at what happened in Uvalde, law wasn't fully complied with. Mm-hmm. And he said that the standards, he said that's one of the reasons why he has asked the TA to hire a school safety director who will be charged with making sure that these school districts comply. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? Is that good enough?
I think it's a start. I think we have different House committees that are going to take a look at different proposed legislation. Again, I would look at, do we expand the authority of the Commission on Law Enforcement? Do we give TEA broader authority? We do need to make it perfectly clear that with respect to ensuring that there's safety plans in place, that they definitely can be audited. We need to remove all doubt with that. But I think that's just the start. And there's 150 members in the House, 31 in the Senate. There's some smart people that are going to come up with their own perspectives, and I think we need to have that open dialogue.
And how soon? I mean, is it, because I know there's been this ongoing discussion about should there be a special legislative session? Obviously, the governor had said he wants the recommendations first.
Sure.
And I know there's a joint House hearing today, actually. But how quickly do you want to see all this?
Everybody's working on it now, right? And I think the governor has it right. Let's have a lot of individual discussions, hearings, those types of things. Let's come up with some well thought out options for the legislature to think through. I've had, just as one individual, I've had extensive discussions on this topic with mental health authorities in the state of Texas, with a social media company. That's a whole nother avenue that we can take. So the discussions are ongoing. This is really a very complex issue. It's complex, again, because of the nature of the state of Texas. We got 1,000 school districts, some school districts with, maybe 1,000 students, and some school districts with, close to 100,000 students, right? So there's no cookie cutter approach in the state of Texas. And so we need to, again, preserve that local control with state control. But I think the governor has it right. Let's assimilate these proposals and let's take them through the legislative process. We'll be better off as a state when we go through that process.
The other topic that we were talking about is mental health. And I showed you this map. When you look at it, green is good in the sense that there was a lot of there was adequate mental health services for school districts.
That's
Blue is only telehealth that's available. Red is no services, and orange was inadequate, and a lot of our area is in orange. When you look at this map on mental health services being available to students, what goes through your mind? Well,
a couple things. One is it's actually an issue that the legislature's been working to respond over the past couple sessions. We've been increasing funding for mental health. We've actually, one session, we allocated $500 million alone just to upgrade our facilities. But it is, I think, an area where we have to be more aggressive. It's difficult. We're a state of 29 million people across several 100,000 square miles. And so the reality is there's probably better access in some of our rural areas versus our urban areas versus our rural areas. So I think we have some opportunities to take a look at our school districts, partnering with our local mental health entities, some of the counties that provide mental health services as well, and to make sure that there's a strong partnership so that the schools get the support that they need from the professional mental health services that are available there locally.
And I mean, does this map surprise you? Does it? It's bothersome. I can't say that I'm totally surprised by it, just because I've been working on mental health issues for probably over a decade, so I might be a little bit more cognizant of some of the challenges in the state of Texas. Again, a lot of it because of our rural area. I mean, Uvalde is a county of 26,000, not a city of 1 million. And so that brings about its own unique challenges. But we've got to address that. I visited a school in my district not too long ago where the students did some voluntary projects, and they could pick any topic that they wanted to address, that they think it was an issue in their school. And easily over 40% was mental health. Really?
Yeah, and so this was at a middle school.
Middle school?
Yeah, and so.
So the students even know?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the students in our school districts, there are programs for students to talk to each other. If you have a friend that wants to harm themselves, is talking about self-harm, how does the student address that? What do they do with that? How do they escalate that? Oh yeah, it's a recognized problem. Obviously, it's escalated. It's gotten worse with COVID, those types of things. But yeah, it's a problem that we have that we need to address.
Dr. Lakey actually did an interview with one of my colleagues, and he said two things. One, the fact that they can't find enough professionals who
Yeah.
want to be paid because the money isn't there.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is a lot of school districts in the TCHAP program are just not on board.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that?
Mental health is a very complex problem. You literally have to spend so much time with one individual. They need the right counseling, they need the right treatment, they need the right medical treatment, and you might even figure out how to get that person on the right path, the right medication, that type of stuff. The problem is mental health, you never solve it. It's not like it's a broken bone that can be healed. Mental health is something on an individual basis that always sticks around. So it's a very difficult, very complex issue that we need to tackle. My hope, my prayer is that all of our school districts are aware that this is an issue that needs to be tackled. My assumption is that there are school districts that may not be focused on this. It probably means that they have a problem and they're not aware of it.
And so what do you, hearing all this, then the question becomes, what will you do to try to ensure that whatever is passed by the legislature is going to be effective and has that teeth to require these school districts to comply?
I think that's where we leverage the authority of the Texas Education Agency, the Commission on Law Enforcement, to give them the appropriate powers that they need to enforce, to make sure that we have our law enforcement that's accredited, that our school districts are following, that have plans and that they're being followed. If we have to do that through audits, those types of things. I think it's a matter of giving the right agencies the right authority to have that oversight.
I did want to ask you about one of the things, since you brought up, the one thing that you're looking at is the social media aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I know Governor Abbott has said he wants to expand Texas iWatch. But
Yeah.
not all these school districts, like Frisco, for example, uses Stop It.
Right.
And so, is there a lack of, these participation in either Stop It or, this Texas iWatch or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that? I mean,
I don't know if that, those are great tools. I think the opportunity that we have with the social media companies is to tighten the relationship between the social media companies and law enforcement. So you have social media companies that are constantly doing searches today for, many different reasons. And of course, one of the things that like a lot of the social media companies do, they're doing searches to find terrorists that are going to harm the United States and the Middle East. And so what do they do with that information? So a lot of what I think would be very impactful is to place requirements on the social media companies that they have a certain amount of time once they find a credible threat to turn that credible threat over to local law enforcement so that law enforcement can take action. These individuals that carry out just these awful, heinous crimes are mentally ill, they're sick, and for whatever reason they're going out on social media and they're telling the public what they're about to do. And so that's a big opportunity for us that I think is another area that we're going to pay attention to this next legislative session.
all right. Anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to say?
I think you got it.
Okay, all right, great.
I think you got
Thank
it.
you so much.
You bet.